the infographic, and that has kind of some of the detailed things. But the idea that this space is obviously vibrant enough and rich enough, as we all know, that not only is it the touch point for a lot of us, but the fact that we can hold ongoing meetings, and it's been going on enough since 2006, and that we'll sit here for an hour and a half and all be very engaged, and some of us even sit on for that hour later into the mentors meeting. So that's better than usual, sort of site traffic for any website. So I don't know if Ebbe, if you want to sort of start things off. I know that obviously you've been outreaching to various community groups. There's been educators and a library focused kind of communities that you've sort of reached out to and chatted with first. And then I think some of us also saw your keynote at the Virtual World's Best Practices in Education. And obviously you're kind of looking to touch back to community groups within Second Life. So it'd be kind of good to maybe set the stage for that and, start talking on that for a bit to start us off.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, I don't know how much you've already heard and I've spoken about before, and I don't want to repeat myself too much. But I try to drop in and meet all kinds of various groups as often as I can across a wide spectrum of different users that are using Second Life for different reasons to better understand how Second Life is being used and what we can do to make it better for everybody, to take it to another level. As you've heard, we've announced that we've begun work on a next generation world, so I'm happy to take questions on that. As much as we know at this point, there's a lot for us to still figure out with regards to that, so it's not like it's all figured out. It's going to take quite a while. And again, reiterate that, of course, we're being life better and better over time as well. Heard hello, everybody? And Glitter, I can't even hear me.
Yeah, your volume's a little low and breaking up a bit. I don't know if maybe, obviously there's a lot of avatars here in a small space.
Problem. Sure that my settings are right.
Yeah, maybe just lower them down for this. I think it's obvious. It's often very easy to have very high draw distance and things like that, and then walk into a place like this with a lot of avatars.
Okay, is this better or the same?
It's better. You're much louder now and clearer. Yes. So maybe it was the mic you were using?
Yeah, actually, okay, this is weird. All right, I'll do this though. I switched to a different mic, but so this works for everybody? Yeah. Okay. Strange. This should be worse, but it's better. Excellent. So yes.
Would you mind just starting from the beginning, because now I can hear you perfectly and I couldn't hear anything.
Absolutely.
This is Glitter. Sorry. Thanks.
Sorry for those who heard me the first time, but I'll do a bit of a repeat. I was just saying that I like to drop in and meet with a lot of different groups, trying to do it as often as possible to learn more about the communities in Second Life and the use cases of Second Life and what works and what doesn't work so well and what can we do better. And I also mentioned that, yes, we have started to talk about the fact that we're building a next generation virtual world. Not a ton of detail of what it is exactly, but I'm happy to take questions and answer as much as we know at this point, which is not even close to everything. It's very early. It's going to take years. It'll probably start to reveal itself in some sort of alpha beta form later next year. And yeah, just I'm extremely happy to be here. The fact that you guys have had this tempo of meeting once a week for this long is an amazing it's an amazing thing, and the fact that you guys do so many good things for for us and for yourselves and for a lot of people to make Second Life a better place. And so I just really appreciate what you all are doing. And I'm looking forward to hearing your questions and spend most of the time on Q&A.
That's great. Yep, as Susan said, you know, there's a wide variety of nonprofits that are here, everything from smaller nonprofit groups all the way up to folks like, you know, through the years, people like Kiva and things like that have also been part of it. So it ranges. And we also have a good mix of folks who are librarians or educators or other social good kind of technology interested people as well. So that kind of is the makeup of the audience that you're kind of speaking to, at least here. And you'll also notice that there's a lot of people who are long-time Second Life users. So, you know, for myself, I go back to January of 2005, and there's a lot of others here that are kind of on that level as well. As Susan said, they used to have in-person kind of picked in-person meetings in regards to that. They would bring people to Linden Lab for those focus groups, and then they moved to kind of town halls, and these sort of events that you're doing are a little close to that in that way, though targeted on the community level. And I guess, you know, a lot of folks are wondering, especially with the educators and nonprofits, how that fits into, you know, this, at least the strategy. I know the details, obviously, on the new platform are still going to be evolving as you develop, right? But I guess the strategy of the nonprofits and educators and those that are sort of doing projects, which are often the kind of early adopters and innovators that then bring in other, you know, groups of people. So what your strategy is kind of for folks like us in that realm.
I wouldn't say we have an explicit strategy to that level of details just yet, except that what we've said is that the next generation will be done in the spirit of Second Life. So open, allow for as much freedom as possible while still keeping it sane and useful to most residents. And so just like in real life and what we see in Second Life, you see a lot of similarities to things that take place between real and Second Life, and we hope that that will happen in the next generation platform as well, where the breadth and depth of use cases and companies and organizations and you know, all the different ways that people do use Second Life today is something that we would be really happy to make sure continues in the next generation. So it's I think of it as more of thinking about trying to do a lot of things the same way in what you can do, but just make sure that you can do it much, much better. Performance, quality, sort of improved user interface. There's a lot of areas that we can improve, but Second Life is sort of, because it's now, you know, 13 years old technologically speaking, and 11 years old in since they opened the doors. There's just a lot of constraints that make it very difficult for us to take it to another level. The one thing that I'm thinking quite differently about for the next generation versus Second Life, at least as we start out, is Second Life today is been primarily, I would say, promoted and advertised to the consumer. And Linden Lab is more or less responsible for acquiring those consumers and so shove those consumers through a fairly narrow front door called secondlife.com, if you will. And then it's up to those consumers to find relevant communities and experiences once they get inside. For the next generation platform, we think a little bit differently from the beginning. We more or less think of the creator as the primary customer as opposed to the consumer, if you will. And we want to empower the creators to be able to create incredible experiences. And those will be, you know, some very similar to what you see in Second Life today, but hopefully look better, be better performant, and easier to use, and more powerful, so they can do even more interesting experiences. And then give those experience creators, and experience creators is a very broad, I mean, many of you are experience creators, if not most of you, but give the experience creators the tools to attract audiences into their experiences from the outside world. Because there's too much variety inside Second Life for us to successfully market to all the different types of users that might want to find these experiences. And so making it easier for people to find experiences from the outside world and come directly into them, and giving the creators the tools to attract and retain users to their experiences is a little bit how I think of it. So I sort of think of it as like turning it inside out a little bit. So those are some general thoughts.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you're sorting along with the chat as well, and it came up as a question sent to me and that we talked about. We kind of had a pre-meeting last week to kind of sort of set the stage of discussing this. Some of what you're saying almost harkens back to, there used to be a community gateway program that Linden Lab had that would kind of nurture, where you still had the general portal that everybody would kind of come in through Second Life. They also kind of had a separate sort of a kind of a different sign-in where people would be filtered into the community gateway of their interests. So sort of an extra part of the sign-up process where they would be asking for interest as well, and then they would funnel them to a community gateway portal rather than just the general Linden Lab ones. So folks like, you Virtual Ability, or here at Nonprofit Commons, we were a community gateway. There were some of the prominent educator communities that were that way too. And it allowed kind of people to sort of self-select on registration that input in. So I think some folks are like wondering in some ways what you're talking about, if there are ways to kind of triage the tool or redact something like that, whether either here or considerations for the next gen platform, so that way there can be a way to help bring people in even if you're still using the same main portal.
Yeah, so I think some of those attempts, like the community gateway and related activities, I think was actually heading in the right direction, and I think they unfortunately were discontinued, if you will, prematurely, and I think maybe that could have been whatever it was, leadership changes, layoffs, and choices had to be made, and unfortunately those ones sort of went out at some point in time. And I think it would have been better off if they had continued to try and make those better and better, because I think ultimately that's the only way to scale, is to sort of expose more of what's going on inside to the outside world and be able to attract people directly into those relevant experiences. So we have on our list of things to look at for Second Life as well. There's a number of projects that are sort of like the Community Gateway project. We have like 3 or 4 things that we're going to meet up and see if we can combine into starting something on Second Life to revive some of those concepts and get some traction on that, and at least then be able to learn some things in advance of the next generation platform, even sort of starting to get up to speed sufficiently to get going on that. So it's on the list of things to do. I'm not sure when we would have the resources to start tackling it, but at least that's how we're thinking. Empower the creators to create incredible things and attract audiences directly into those things.
Yeah, that would be great. And the in kind of relation to that too, I mean, that kind of feeds off of some of the the focus group stuff that we were talking, that kind of thing. Like what these features that you're talking about, and obviously these meetings that we're having now, and I guess we'll kind of probably go into this more as we go, but what's the plan for continuing to kind of interact with and engage these communities of interest, whether it be nonprofit, educational, that kind of thing, in this process of of any of the fixes in regards to, or changes in regards to Second Life, or even the developing of a secondary platform. So I think that's important beyond these conversations today. What's sort of the plan of engagement there?
Yeah, so there's fortunately, or unfortunately, but more fortunately in some ways, there's a lot of different groups with a lot of different viewpoints and great feedback. So obviously I try to pop in on meetings like this as often as I can. Obviously the people that are working on Second Life have various meetings as well with various groups to provide and get feedback on their roadmap. And right now, on what we're doing with regards to the next generation, it's still so early. There's like all this obvious plumbing that you just have to do, regardless of where we're going to ultimately take it with regards to the user experience. So right now we're dealing with things like rendering engines and physics engines and lighting and terrain systems and all kinds of basic building blocks that you sort of need, and we're just making sure that each of those are much, much, much better than what we have in Second Life today. And as we get more and more down sort of the path of what should the exact experience be and the exact feature set on top of that experience and what's the priorities of those things, then we'll obviously start to engage more and more with the community. And then we'll obviously open the doors early enough that, none of the extreme decisions have already been made. So the first users that can come in and check this thing out sometime in the first half of next year is my guess, as alpha users, maybe under NDA or something. And we'll try and make sure we get a cross-section of different users to be able to come in and create things. And it'll be primarily, good creators that can really give us good feedback on what can be created and can't be created and how can it be better. And then, and that will be early in the process. And then as we progress, we'll open more and more for more and more people to be able to come in and see what we're doing and provide feedback. And we'll then start to really think about what kind of teams and what kind of processes do we need to be able to collect as much feedback as possible from a broad range of users and groups and people that are trying to do different things. What about education? What about games? What about communities? What about social interaction, communication? Lots of different aspects that we'll get feedback on. So there will be plenty of time to do that for the next generation product. I don't think we're at the point yet where it's going down a particular path that anyone would sort of disagree with yet. So that'll come more, like I would say, next year. As far as the Second Life roadmap, which is more now and here, we've already sort of announced what the things that the team are focusing on, and then as they progress on those things and start to figure out what to work on next. Obviously, you guys, I'm not sure what the easiest way to interact with that group is, but we should make sure that it's easy for you guys to provide feedback to that team on what you think is the most important things to improve in Second Life.
Yeah, there was a structure in a broader, and I think this got brought up at when I watched the video of the last meeting that you had. There was a structure of more of a community group, a community kind of focused liaisons within Second Life. I mean, there still are community folks, obviously, on your team, but much more concerted effort that there were staff members that were sort of sorted to that. And somebody, actually, I think that's on Ebbe's side.
Well, we have some questions here. So I saw.
Sure.
Will you expose metadata to users and creators? Think of it like early on. We were thinking of it. A creator that creates an experience should have something like Google Analytics or something to be able to understand what kind of activity is taking place with regards to their experience, and to help them optimize for what's going on there. If that answers the question, it was for JJ Drinkwater. And then, will we consider full ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, from the ground up? Yeah, we're I wouldn't say we've specifically thought about that, but clearly that's something we need to solve for. So we're trying to think of how do we make sure that the user interface is extremely flexible, so that it can actually be customized and tailored. We have said that we're not starting the product as open source from the beginning. It's probably basically to try and sort of contain complexity. But we want to enable the user interface to be extended and be very flexible and modified and updated, so that people can get better or can sort of modify the experience that is more optimum for them, whether that's because of disabilities or other use cases where users want the user interface to be slightly different. So think of it like being able to have a system of add-ons or extensions or something to be able to modify the user face and experience and provide as much access to those types of developers as possible to modify and extend the user experience. Let's see what else we have here.
And I have a couple questions on my side as well. So I can ask you one of those. So Lauren Alunia, or Lune, I'm going to slaughter his name, but he was asking sort of to the point of some of the things that you were talking about, that keeping the function while enhancing the ability and performance of things, that those who work in K through 12 public education, and I also know this kind of goes for those also working with youth and nonprofit related things, but who are constantly seeking to engage students, that they have concerns about user experience and young user safety, and then for that first point in building out his project, they realized how steep the learning curve can be, and what are your thoughts on making that initial entry easy without sacrificing the complexity of that high-end, of the functions that high-end users would want.
Yeah, I think that's the part of the complexity of Second Life is just the incredible breadth and depth and of it's almost like everything you have on the internet is sort of shoved into this one box called Second Life. It's a communication system, it's a social network, it's got build tools, it's got an economy. That's like having eBay, PayPal, Skype, and some high-end 3D authoring tools all in one product. Which makes it really difficult to make it simple. But I do definitely believe we can do a lot better than we have in the past. Without dumbing it down so that you somehow suddenly become constrained in experiences that you can create, because that's part of the what makes Second Life so great is just the incredible breadth and depth of experiences that are being created. So we certainly don't want to limit what can be done. With regards to the safety and how do you get educators to be more comfortable to send people into these experiences, well, if we make it a lot easier for someone to create an experience, choose who can access that experience, and have a very easy way to bring users directly into that experiences without having to go through our generic front door to get to that experience, I think that will make it very much easier for people to comfortably create what would more or less kind of feel like standalone experiences, where they can sort of keep it a little bit more contained to what they want their users to see and do. So those are some of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, on the kind of continuation that kind of jumps off of that, in regards to, say, bringing in youth, right? teenagers in that regard. Obviously, you probably know from the history of Second Life, there used to be a whole teen Second Life grid, and several of us, and myself included, actually did a lot of, were part of educational programs there for many years until Linden Lab took that away. I mean, obviously, you know, it wasn't as economically viable, I think, to keep it separate, and, you know, and, but those that are doing work with teenagers, like, is there any thoughts about how that demographic could fit into even that next generation world, whether, you know, that you're developing, like those that don't fall into that, I guess, you know, age group that are coming into Second Life now and harking back to that teen Second Life?
Yeah. So there's different ways to slice and dice this pie. So today's Second Life is like one pie with, you know, some ratings for whether there's pepperoni can only be on one side of the pizza and not on the other side. But I think we'll be much more flexible with the next generation, where the notion of different grids, if you want to call it that, or domains will be a lot easier to do. We still have to think about whether we want to have multiple namespaces. Like, so if you come to different experiences, do you have to register all over again, or can you have the same identity across all? For now, we're saying you can have the same identity across all, and you can communicate across all, and you can have a social network across all. But you could have a user obviously be constrained as to which parts they could access, or which parts or which users you want to allow into your experience. So as long as people are comfortable saying, I can create a student, call it a subgrid, and students come straight into that, and everything that has been sort of approved by someone, not necessarily us, but someone, to be part of that part of the world, or that side of the pizza. Those users could still, of course, find their way out of there and go to the other side of the world, where they might interact with something that educator would not necessarily be wouldn't be happy with if their kids went to those places. So it's a little bit like a city, you know, or a country. We all have our identity. We can go anywhere we want, more or less. And you just try and tell kids to, you know, don't go to that neighborhood. But I think it will be a lot easier in the future where we make it easy for people to have their users sort of have direct access into a particular experience or set of experiences. So where they can more control the messaging and what the experience for those users are.
Yep, and I think you see some of that development, or concept of that development, if you look to the open source movement that has spawned off of Second Life and opening the viewer, where you have the concept of the hypergrid, right? And even Second Life has the ability through like the registration API capabilities to kind of lock people to a region, or, you know, allow people in through the estate settings. So obviously I think that, you know, continuing on and refining that would make those things better.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of this is possible today, but today it just takes, you know, a little bit of rocket science to sort of set it up. So this should just be super easy for an educator to just sort of do out of the box, not have to become sort of a master of APIs. And I mean, even just trying to configure your LAN to know who can go there and who can't go there, it's like it takes it takes some understanding to do that today, and we could obviously make that a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. And okay, I think we can probably let's sort of drop to Pathfinders right now. Can you share a particular functionality broad feature that the current SL completely lacks, but that could be enabled in the future spiritual successor to SL? And I think France Charming also posed a similar question about that. You know, what sort of would be possible in that next gen that isn't possible now?
Well, I think with better tools, better scripting language, basic core capabilities, more interesting experiences will be created from that. So it's not necessarily that it's specific features. It's just all of the features we have been done better. I mean, like we're just rolling out experience keys right now, which will sort of open the door for a whole new set of types of experiences that couldn't really be done before in a what would be at least a reasonable user experience. So that's just one example. So, I mean, you could almost do anything in Second Life that you can do on any other game engine. It just the results wouldn't be as good, and if they're not good enough, then your conversion rate and the ability, or having users stick around in those experiences will obviously be challenging. So, in some ways, we're thinking about a lot of just being related to quality, performance, scale, are sort of the core areas we're focusing on now. And then on top of that, you start adding ease of use, having user interface that are easier to understand. And all those things combined, you will have experiences that you'll see in the next generation that you just could not create in Second Life. You might be able to create the same idea, but not with the same level of sophistication and quality of execution. So that's probably sort of what we're thinking about mostly.
Yeah, and I misread Fran's part to that as well, which is sort of the converse of that. In that next generation platform, what's the possibility of things that won't be there that are here? So what will we lose? I know some people have been concerned about what that means for content that's been created and porting over any of that and those things.
So what we've said is that we're not going to make content backwards compatibility constrain how good the next generation product can be. Which means a lot of content's been created to do, whether it's our avatars or our clothes or our houses or experiences. It's not something will just automatically function the same in this next generation product. There will be certain assets that you can bring over. We've said that it should be easy to obviously bring over your identity and your Linden dollars and be able to go back and forth between the two as you wish. But a lot of content will have to be created from the ground up. Because in this day and age, you just wouldn't really start from where Second Life started. And we just have too much content that it would be too complex for us to try and something much, much better that still has to be able to deal with all the existing content. And then to provide all the tools to actually, edit and manipulate that content when it really should be done in very different ways. So that's what we said so far. Yeah.
And in relation to that,
there was a question as what will not be possible. Well, in the beginning, when we opened the doors to this to a limited user set, there would probably be a lot of things that you can do in Second Life today that you can't do in the new product right off the bat. I mean, Second Life has 11 years of features and functionalities and funky nooks and corners of capabilities that we won't necessarily start off by replicating everything we have, because a lot of the things we have in Second Life we probably shouldn't have, because it's part of what's adding to the complexity and the confusion of the experience. So it'll probably when you first see it or first get access to it, you'll probably find a number of things like, whoa, where did my feature X, Y, and Z go that I like so much? Well, we'll see over time how those things get added in a logical fashion that doesn't just create what I call, Second Life is a little bit of the stovepiped things piled on top of things, and it reached a point where for most normal people it's just overwhelming, and we have to see how we can not start off with that amount of complexity, but sort of grow into the right experience over time.
But just to follow on that, to be sure we're clear, I think what you're getting at, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ebbe, is that there may be at least at the start some features and functionality that the next generation version doesn't have or won't have, but in terms of the sort of rules of it, the conceptions of the kinds of things that can be done and made on this platform, as you were saying at the outset, the idea is that it will be very much in the spirit of Second Life in terms of the same degrees of freedom and openness for people to create whatever they like. There isn't an idea of create the next generation that's very closed off, very limited, or anything like that.
No, that's absolutely true. I mean, our goal is to allow people to create more interesting experiences that haven't been possible today, not less. I'm just saying, in the early days of this next generation, if your first look at it, you might feel that something's missing that you've grown accustomed to or dependent on, and it'll take a while for those things to find its way in there, maybe in a different form, but and hopefully in a different form, because otherwise we're just replicating a little bit of the messy stuff we have in Second Life. But so enable more powerful creations, more interesting creations, and still try and deal with the range of different types of creators. You have high-end creators that are comfortable with Maya and high-end scripting and stuff like that, and then you have people that are more tweakers and customizers, and then you have people that just more or less like to buy clothes and get dressed, and we have to sort of figure out how to tailor to these different types of creators, and we might target them in a different sequence so that it's not obvious to all of those users day one that they're going to be a solution for them. But ultimately, we want to make sure that we provide a solution for as many people as possible to create.
Okay.
And that's why there's no question to talk about any closure of Second Life, or we Second Life will be going on for a long, long time, and people will over time be able to choose where they decide to spend their time and do their creations. And hopefully we reach a point where people much prefer to create and spend their time in the next generation product. But today there's no way we can really determine how long that will take, and could be a long, long time.
And while we sort of jump off that kind of thing, I had another question come in from Matt Burns that kind of jumps off of this in some ways. It relates to, you think about devices like Oculus Rift and Cryo VR and things like that. And obviously, there's folks like High Fidelity. Philip Rosedale, who was the founder of Second Life, has been working with a lot of those sort of tools. And I think people are curious to know if there's, and has also been thinking about the identity aspect throughout, the metaverse. And I think people are curious about what, if any, interaction or communication there is that goes on between High Fidelity and Linden Lab still. I know your Linden Lab is part of the investor for them. And then I guess any of those other thoughts to those kind of tools like Oculus and in the development process.
Yeah, so we as you all probably know, we have Oculus support in Second Life today in our project viewer, and we have people coming by the office here, whether it's press or various kinds of interested users. And if you're in the neighborhood, drop on by. We can give you an Oculus tour in our office here. We're actually going to try and work and create a cool little lab. And we're eagerly awaiting the next version, the DK2, which has begun shipping from what I hear. And so, and then we'll do the work to update our project viewer to work with that new SDK. It'll probably take a few weeks of work to do that, and then get that out in your hands so that creators, and today it's really just for the creators. There are no consumers that have an Oculus. I mean, a consumer version that will sell at like significant scale is I think is a year plus away. So this is early days, just experimenting with it, but it's really cool. I wouldn't, a lot of the issues while we're working on next generation platform is that Second Life and Oculus are not necessarily the best marriage. You need a very highly performant product with high quality to get the most out of an experience like we're working with something like the Oculus. So, and we've said from the beginning that the next generation we're going to build it so that it targets phones, pads, PCs, and Oculus, and if other hardware that's meaningful ways to consume bits and pieces of Second Life or this next generation world, we'll tack those on as well. As far as input devices, certainly with an Oculus, your keyboard becomes kind of like and mouse become not very logical input devices with an Oculus strapped to your face. And no one's really figured out what the answer to that's going to be. We did early experiments with Leap Motion so that you can use hand gestures to do stuff, but Leap Motion 1.0 just wasn't good enough. We've had them visit us here in the office a few weeks back to take a look at their Leap Motion 2.0 that's coming out. It's much, much better. Still not sure if it's going to be mass market enough and good enough for us to integrate with that, but it's possible. We're also meeting on Monday with another company that's doing a lot of work. Sixth Sense, we're doing a lot of work with their STEM system and just talk to them about whether their devices are the right ones. I've met with very senior leadership at Oculus/Facebook and sort of asked them what their thoughts are, because they're sort of introducing a bit of this problem by providing a device that sort of makes the keyboard and the mouse not particularly useful anymore. And what are their thoughts? And it's not obvious what the answer is going to be. There's going to be a lot of different experiments with different user interfaces and input methods, and whether it's exoskeletons or cameras reading your motions or speech to text. There's lots of combinations of things that will be experimented with over time, and we'll obviously look at that, and we want to make sure we also don't waste our time doing something that's useful to 3 people. So it's going to have to be something that has a chance of being, fairly broad mass market appeal. So that's where we're at with those kinds of things. The relationship with Hi-Fi and Philip, we're just colleagues that just sort of check in with each other every now and then on what we're up to. We have no plans right now in the works of actually doing any explicit sharing of technology or anything like that. But we meet up now and then and just, hey, what you're working on, what are you working on, what works, what doesn't work, and just sort of just being friendly and sharing thoughts and ideas. But other than that, there's no active collaboration going on. And yeah, our investment in them is very, very small. So it's pretty. It's not a big deal. So yeah, that's that.
Yeah, I think we had a couple of questions that kind of fall upon this, obviously, and you touch upon it too, right? There's a whole need for user experience design in these new devices, and somebody asked about the scale aspect for obviously virtual worlds, things like scale and that are important, and and again in your next generation platform, like what the thoughts on those kind of things. Like, so I guess that's user experience, scale, You
mean scale as in, the size of things? Or scale of avatars?
Becomes very important when you're, in an immersive sort of scenario with an Oculus, right?
Yeah, it becomes more obvious that, the sizes of door openings and the heights of ceilings and sizes of avatars start to become more relevant in those kinds of things. And that's why we put the Oculus out there, because a lot of it is some of the things are what we're doing, but a lot of it is also what creators are doing. And so doing Oculus work right now is not for us to reach a lot of consumers. Hopefully that will happen in years' time. But to get it out now is to put it in the hands of you guys and all kinds of creators to be able to experiment with and go, oh my God, I would have built this stuff differently if I had thought about people seeing this experience or going through this experience with the Oculus. And so it's more for us to learn and for you to learn. And then down the road, hopefully a lot of consumers will experience this. And I think they will. But what percentage of time spent on something like a virtual world like Second Life or Next Generation will be done through an Oculus versus on your iPad or PC? Like it's too early to know. We can speculate, but I obviously think it's great that the Oculus is doing the work they're doing, and they're bringing the cost down from the tens of thousands of dollars to a few $100s for people to be able further. That in aggregate will also help us have more interesting experiences and more immersive experiences, and ultimately really be able to create experiences that give you that total sense of presence. It'll come with time, but how soon it will come so that your average person can just sort of walk into that experience by having the right hardware, the right software, and the whole setup just so that will take quite a while to be true for a lot of people.
Okay, looks like we had a little blip in the conversation, but seems to be most of it came through. So let's kind of drop this away from the tech kind of platform stuff. So we had some questions. The sort of some functionality related things that are kind of some pain points in regards to Second Life, I guess, in the way now for those that are doing projects that are educators, nonprofits in this space. A few of them are the idea that there isn't, because everything is tied to avatar identity in this space, that kind of becomes problematic for those that might be doing project-based work. There's no way to have or at least even it's against the terms of services, to have kind of a corporate avatar and be able to kind of use that in a way to be owner of a project per se. And especially when you have something that might be on a academic administrator level, you need sort of something like that if staff come and go. Even on a nonprofit side, you might need something like that. We do right now. The sim is owned by an alt in that way, right? The one that we're sitting in for that reason. And that also gets tied to, on the nonprofit side of things, those that are 501c3s, the ability to be able to kind of cash out and sort of sort things in that way. So there's kind of that scope of the question about that in regards to some way to designate, sort of in the same way that Linden Lab does now with, is this avatar going to be a bot, right? Could this avatar be a corporate identity, like a company related thing rather than an individual, and that be able to be tied to a tax ID or a nonprofit, is another part of that as well. So thoughts on that?
I don't have any strong thoughts on that. I mean, I think, I don't have any super clever thoughts on that right away. But I think, and there might have been several sort of questions there. The ability for, there's one thing of being able to manage, call it manage users. So if I'm a company, what employees or members or what it might be of a group of people should have access and should not have access, and how many places do I have to manage this access list when probably many companies and organizations already have some tool they're using to manage their users. So are there things we should do to be able to tie these things together. And this is fairly common in sort of business applications, to be able to integrate with other user management systems, so that it becomes easier to manage who has access and who doesn't. And we'll think about those things. As far as tying yourself to for taxation or stuff like that, I haven't really thought about at all. So I don't even know what we could or should do. So that'd be interesting to get some of those written up and sent to us, so we can.
Yes.
And there might be people here who have thought about those things, but I haven't. So it'd be great to get that feedback and figure out what we can do with it.
It definitely came up in our discussion last week, but it certainly affects anybody who does any fundraising. And though, as Glitter said, it can be a little problematic in regards to you dealing with a microtransaction. So fundraising equates a little bit differently, but you do have successful campaigns. Like, think about Relay for Life. We're all very familiar with that, and you're looking at there where they're raising hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm myself and others here have done sort of more localized fundraising, and even on those levels, there's no way to tie. It's an individual tax ID number and not your company's tax ID number. So if you cash that out, that's sort of, or a check is drawn, that's sort of seen in that way. Similar, in the now that's affected by, like, if a creator. I think with the tax changes, the tax law changes that happened, there's triggers in place on the Linden Lab side of things for content creators if they're earning so much money through the system that they have to fill out that I-9 or EI-9 or whatever the form is, and then the corresponding international one. Similarly, if you were doing transactional stuff for the, on a business level, selling things for the business, or on a donational level for a nonprofit, it shouldn't be tied to the individual, because that has far-reaching implications. If somebody, raises $10,000 for a charity or something, which has happened, I myself have done, and then would have to, have that be a personal donation, go through your own personal sort of scenarios. So I think that's what that relates to.
Yeah. Send me or Pete or us in some way thoughts on that, and then we can think about it, whether we can abstract that in a way, because it's probably it's a lot of potentially slightly different use cases. And then, as someone also commented here, you go international and the complexity might explode on us. So we have to think about how to make that some generic solution that doesn't get overly cumbersome for us to do.
See if we had I guess in response to that, in regards to those that are thinking about fundraising, and this probably comes upon to the kind of currency commerce system of that next generation platform. Zinnia was asking about PayPal integration for the next gen world, but that probably brings up questions of the overall thoughts on what currency and commerce would be like in that next generation platform.
Our current thinking is to basically extract the capabilities of all things commerce and money and virtual currencies and all that from Second Life, so that it becomes a service that both Second Life and this next generation product could use. So I would think of them as being very similar, and so that's not an area we necessarily feel we have to do something. It's already a very strong system, and so we don't necessarily feel we have to completely redo that. It's more of right now it's just intertwined with Second Life in sort of a unnecessarily complex way, and so by just extracting it and making it a service, so I would expect a lot of similarities. The same currency, all the work we've done to make it a very stable virtual currency that people trust is something that we just want to continue with going forward.
Great.
I see a question here from Laura. Do you have a preferred method for us sending specific inquiries of that kind, or feedback or thoughts or ideas? And actually, Pete and I looked at our secondlife.com and how would someone give us feedback? And it was a little embarrassing. It's actually not that simple. We have this Jira bug tracking tool, but that's not like something a normal human being would use to just give us some thoughts or feedback. So I think that's something we have to figure out how to do easier, and maybe we'll at least make sure that we have a basic like feedback at lindenlab.com email or something where people can just send in thoughts and ideas so that we can collect them at a higher rate, because I think today people with feedback wouldn't necessarily know how to give it to us in an easy way. Now, if it is bugs, we would obviously we'd certainly want them to go into the Jira system so they can be tracked and prioritized and all that. But we also don't want people to not give us feedback or bugs because it's just too complicated. So something we'll need to solve for.
Yeah, and certainly in the meantime, there's been obviously other discussions post this, post your meetings. There's often a lot of community discussions that post packs that. I don't know how much you get to see those links, but any questions that filter through this, like, obviously we'll be following up on the nonprofit commons side of things, so you can funnel things through us. And I know there's been discussions and from some of the few of the folks in the audience too, like how to create kind of self-organize a almost working group that could interface with Linden Lab in that way that would be representative of nonprofits, educators, folks like that fall within our range to be able to feed feedback and thoughts to you in that way.
Yeah, that's what I've asked most groups I've met with is if they can collaborate and come up with a perspective and a view on what's the most important things and try and prioritize them as a group before they come to us, because there's no shortage of ideas. We have millions of them. But the tough work is usually in prioritizing them. Some things are easier for you guys to prioritize than it is for us. But if each of you gave us feedback, we wouldn't necessarily know how to prioritize those things from your perspective. So that would be very helpful when groups of people come together and sort of think it through to the next level of what really will have the biggest impact. Because if we were trying to do everything that people ask us to do, we would hardly get anywhere.
Yep, and I know there's definitely lots of very engaged but different communities. Having was part of organizing all the Second Life community conventions that happened in real life, that were user group, in essence, user conventions, and they ebbed and flowed from 2005 to 2011. But hundreds of people in any of those, and the breadth of various communities, whether we're here today, we're educators and nonprofits predominantly, but there are folks that are role-playing communities and destination related things and more social things, or music communities. So there's a huge plethora, and I can see how that would obviously get out of hand. So coming up with a good way to triage and within the community way would probably be good. I had a couple of questions come to me in the back end, sort of on the promotion related thing. Obviously, way back early in the conversation, you brought up how the secondlife.com is obviously promoted to the more general user base, but how how can nonprofits and educators who want sort of visibility either get on the destination guide, or a way to kind of promote the work that that we're doing and sort of show off on the website in some ways, a way to kind of to on the secondlife.com portal to be that way. Thoughts on that?
I can jump in there a little bit. Yeah, so on the destination guide, it actually should be easy. There's a form to fill out, also an email, but if you just ping me, I can send that link out to you. And generally, we've been sort of pulling from there for things like periodic blog posts, kind of pulling out some sort of highlights there as well. So especially if you have particular events or special things going on, we'd love to know and through that email address is really the best way to sort of highlight that to us. In terms of more sort of general promotion and things that we could do to help make you more visible, one, if you have ideas about it, I would love to know them. Please just ping me, and I'd love to hear this. We're always looking right now at, what else we can do in a similar way to the destination guide, and sort of leveraging that to make it easier for everybody to sort of promote what they're doing in Second Life to the community. To the outside world, though, simply, I'd love to, where I can hear from everybody about what's going on in your world and the work that you're doing through meetings like this, as well as just sort of one-offs, whether it's email or an Inworld IM. That's super helpful for us. As Ebbe mentioned, we are often in touch with the media, whether they're coming in for interviews and demos or just sort of one-off opportunities. And the more sort of fresh stories from Second Life that we have about the interesting things that are going on and the great things that groups like yours are doing, certainly the better it is for us, the better it is for Second Life, and hopefully the better it is for your groups as well. So please, the short answer is in terms of the Inworld, promoting things to the community and raising visibility within Second Life, Destination Guide is the best place to start. But then, over and above that, in terms of just being sure that we're up on what you're doing, letting us know through direct messages, through email, through noting it in the forums, on community blogs. We try and keep an eye on all of that. So the more you can tell us, the easier it is for us to help sort of pull those out and highlight them.
Great. And looks like there's a question back to you, Pete, about from Zinnia, about should we share with you any conference presentations or research that we're doing in SL? And I guess this goes for obviously education or nonprofit communities.
Yeah, absolutely. That's we're thirsty for content, and particularly thoughtful stuff like that is really helpful for us to have and be aware of. So that would be great.
And there was a question up above from Pathfinder. Have you thought about creating structured feedback opportunities like surveys so you could collect both qualitative and quantitative data on users?
Well, yes and no. For the next generation, like I said, we're sort of early. Sort of it's basic sort of meat and potato stuff that we have to deal with. But how to scale up, doing more of that is something we're going to have to figure out how to do successfully. And it's whether it's bringing users in for usability testing, surveys to better understand what users are doing, looking at the data of people are actually doing, market analysis. There's a ton of things that we can and will do and are doing. To help make sure that we make the right decisions and provide something that makes sense to people. But I wouldn't say we have sort of a machine going for that kind of activity. But it's something we'll work on.
Okay, great. And looking up at some other questions. Beyond, obviously, you've met with educators, librarians, our nonprofit commons community today. What other types of Second Life, user communities are you looking to reach out to yet? Obviously, some of us here have multiple community kind of connections, so that would be useful for us to also help with you guys if we had an idea on that.
Yeah, if you have ideas for communities that would like to meet with me or that I think would be useful for me to meet, and I'm like I said, I'll try to meet with as many as possible. So I'm psyched to do that. Well, it's various ways. I mean, we hop around ourselves, as alts, participating in communities, to seeing communities from the inside. We meet with as many sort of established groups and communities as possible. Possible to do even more, but so far I've met with quite a few. Whether it's Pete would actually know better which ones we've met with, and maybe which ones we should still meet with than me, because I don't even know the ones that I don't know, but Pete does. Pete, any thoughts on?
Not at the moment. I'd have to look back at our. We've met with quite a few, and yeah, certainly open to more and
yeah.
As,
I mean, there's open source communities, there's educational communities, there's you guys. There's been other teams, communities as well. And then, like I said, we have just spent quite a bit of time in World interacting with people, either as obvious Lindens or as not so obvious Lindens, to understand what's going on. And then there's also just looking at data on what's taking place where, and what are people doing, how are they behaving. So yeah, I haven't met with any religious ones yet. That was asked.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely some crossovers to that, and there's obviously more social related ones. You have a lot of the niche sort of things that fall under social, like folks that are role playing Star Trek or steampunk communities, which are heavy content creator focused.
Yeah, and we're looking some of those role playing communities we're actually looking at, and those are actually sometimes hard to sit in front of like this and have a conversation with. Mm-hmm. You more or less have to sort of go undercover and be part of it to fully understand it. And so we're doing some of that as well.
And I guess Serene just posted a question. The terms of service changes still do not satisfy artists and creators. Any comments? And I don't know if you want to add to that, Serene, what still problems there are that might help.
I didn't understand the question.
I guess this relates back to the terms of service change a couple months ago in the intellectual property related things that kind of caused a stir with the content creation and the IP. And there was recently a change in the terms of service, I think, to try to help with that, to help ease some of that. But I guess there's still problems in that regard. But
yeah, it's one of those things that I'm not sure if we ever get to 100%. It's take any legal contract and get 1 million people to agree with everything in it. Like it's not possible. What we have said though very clearly is the content's yours. We have no interest in taking your content and benefit or profit from that independently in some way. I mean, it seems like some people have fear that we're going to sort of, be able to take content and monetize it for ourselves. I don't even know if it's even possible. And clearly something that we haven't done or not would be very, very bad for our business when the whole business is dependent on the content creators being comfortable creating content and profit from their creations. So, of course, someone's here saying, what if LL sells SL and the next owner does X, Y, or Z? Well, clearly, any owner can change the terms. We could change the terms tomorrow to make it really bad for you, and so could a future owner that we don't know who it is. Obviously, that in our mind, that would be a very, very stupid thing to do. I mean, that would be that would be a way to rapidly sort of make this business go in the wrong direction. And so I would trust that anyone that may buy this company would would see it the same way. I mean, if you look at it from our perspective, it's not that complicated. We're completely dependent on people coming to this platform and create content and experiences and be able to profit from those experiences. That's our business model. If we start to compete with those users, or if we start to steal their stuff or whatever, that model won't work. And then I'm not sure what model would work. It just wouldn't be in our interest. So I'm not really sure what the big hoopla is. And actually, if we look at it, it's actually not that many people that are wigged out about it. There's clearly some that are think it's extremely important. It is extremely important, but there's some that think that they're extremely concerned, and I have a hard time understanding why that is actually.
Yeah, I think ultimately content creation for the creator itself is a very intense thing. You know, it's like, you know, birthing a child through your whatever, right? So I think you will always have that, breadth of it. And I mean, an IP is very important. But, to the Linden Lab side of thing, obviously, you need to ask for a certain amount of rights in order to be able to provide the platform and the services to be able to spin up all this content. So, I guess the last question in all of this, since we need to kind of be, at least on the transcription side, we need to be kind of wrapping up in that regard. Those that do have full IP rights to their content, do we ever see a time where we could be able to download and output a full, like in OpenSim, there's an OAR, right? The whole region file where you'd be able to, especially for an educator or nonprofit, to be able to kind of export that whole region. It's capable in the open source OpenSim side of things, and I think folks here are curious about wanting to do similar for their projects.
Yeah, I have. If you want to take your content out of Second Life and take it somewhere else, I'm fine with that. I have no issues with that. I don't know if we're doing everything we can to make that super simple for you, but over time you probably find that all the features and functionalities of Second Life might not have, a lot of other systems that are, sufficiently compatible to just run it as it is. But if it's your creation, then you should be able to take it wherever you want. I just can't promise that it'll function somewhere else as it does here. But I'll be fine with that. And I saw if some Second Life user wants to license content to another company. So let's say you create a cool game or a cool character, and then you wanted to license that to Pixar, then you wouldn't be able to. I don't understand why you wouldn't be able to do that. We certainly have no interest in preventing you from doing that.
Maybe they're thinking about the exclusivity. Could have, if the other entity would be asking for exclusive rights, then it would be problematic here, right?
Well, if they want exclusive rights, then you as a content creator might have to take the creation out of Second Life, right? If they say, no, you can't have your character that you started creating Second Life and have it in Pixar, Pixar might say, take it out of Second Life, but that's up to the creator, right? I don't think we're involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like we said, no, your creation has to stay here. You can't take it out of here. What? We've never prevented you from, deleting your content if you want to.
So I think we can probably wrap up. I'm sure there's going to be still discussion here afterwards, but at least for the transcription side of things, the formal kind of part of this, we can wrap up. And thank you, Ebbe and Pete, for being here. I mean, I think that these community meetings are a great kind of reinvigoration of those of us that have continued on through the years, right, here in Second Life, and are dedicated to kind of using immersive spaces like Second Life for, often sort of serious or purposeful related projects. Are happy to have kind of this ability to be able to kind of talk to you and have that voice directly, and with Linden Lab. So if we can continue that, that would be great. And I mean, obviously on our side, we'll follow up. And I think, like I said, there's initiatives of trying to create kind of a informal group to be able to kind of maybe on a working group on the community at large kind of side for things like this. But any last thoughts and kind of in relation to that or anything else we've talked about here? If you have any other thoughts before we wrap up.
Sorry, sorry, did you ask me something?
Oh, just we're ending this part of it. So if you have any thoughts,
Yeah.
Wrap up.
No, if we're going off the record, now we can really go. I'm just kidding.
We have the secret plans.
No, I might have to pop out. I might have to pop out at any point in time here, but I'll stick around until my next meeting shows up at my door. So.
I would just say thanks so much for having us and for reaching out, setting this up, and including us. It's nice to get to chat with you all, and I look forward to being in touch.
Thank you guys so much for coming. I've spoken to many Lindens over the years, and actually even accompanied Philip to Congress, and so it's really nice to kind of talk to the new leadership and hear how open you guys are to our work and to sharing and your spirit of openness in general. So just wanted to thank you.
Susan was one of a few handful with Philip that I think that was in 2008 did a congressional hearings on Second Life. So, and I'm sure she'll come to visit you guys since TechSoup is in San Francisco. You guys are neighbors, and she's been there many times. So, so yeah, thanks to both of you. And then I guess we can kind of take this off with the transcript for that, and see you all next week for the Nonprofit Commons meeting, and then I'm sure there'll be interactions. And conversations post this as well. And just a reminder, nonprofitcommons.org, the live transcript is still up there, but then we'll post the full cleaned up transcript on there as well. And I think Mal Burns was recording, so whenever he wants to share a link on that would be great. So that's it for us here today. So we can take this informally.